Let's move on to a massive issue in San Francisco, and it's housing and affordability.
Right.
It's no secret that, it's extremely expensive to live in San Francisco. The median home value is around 1.4 million, I believe. Rents are 70% higher than the national average. So how would you address this crisis? And I'd like to hear about this Reconstruction Finance Corporation you're talking about, because it seems interesting.
Yeah. I think a lot of the focus on trying to fix the crisis of housing in San Francisco and in the country recently has been around kind of regulatory reform, things like zoning reform, permit reform. And, I'm not saying that stuff's unimportant, but if you actually talk to nonprofit housing developers, affordable housing developers, a huge issue is just financing, and it's just like the larger macroeconomic environment. There's so many projects that just get stalled for decades because they can't get the money to build the housing that's necessary. So the idea around the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, this is a larger project that I worked on at New Consensus over the last several years. It's recreating this agency that existed during the New Deal and World War II. It was a government-owned corporation called the RFC that was at one point the largest corporation in the world by assets under management. And the job of the RFC, there's kind of like this public bank and a VC and an investor and also this project manager that was a proactive unit or proactive like muscle of the government that went out and made sure things that we wanted to get built actually got built. It's larger than just for housing. We used it during World War II to build out supply chain, build out all kinds of industries that we needed to build. But
Yeah.
in the context of housing, what I imagine is, say we've got an affordable housing development that's been stuck in development hell for years. The RFC would be the agency that goes in there and really fixes it and has every tool at its disposal to make sure it happens. If it's just like we need to have lower interest rates, sure, it can do low interest rate financing. But if the problem is there's no developer coming in to actually build this housing because it's not profitable enough or whatever, then the RFC can have a public developer that comes in and builds the housing directly, right? It's kind of a jack of all trades executive agency that'll make sure things happen. And I think that at the end of the day, that's the problem we have in San Francisco is we just don't have enough affordable housing getting built to allow working people to continue living in the city.
Yeah. And obviously, I think, that's an overarching plan that would help everyone. But just to give our listeners some trans-specific context, Teen Vogue reported that 22% of trans high schoolers have experienced homelessness, compared to only 3% of cisgender high schoolers. Just to ask you about some of the other policies as well, which would make San Francisco more affordable. You mentioned childcare essential services. So can you address that issue?
Yeah, I think childcare is another situation where costs are just skyrocketing nationwide. And all these issues really, they're happening all over the country, but they're really acute in San Francisco. And one of the themes I'm really trying to push with my campaign is the idea that these are not San Francisco specific problems. They're really bad in San Francisco because our level of unaffordability and our inequality is so bad.
Yeah.
But they're really problems that we have to tackle at a national level. It's just gotten to a point where it's a breaking point, right? And the city's not going to be able to tackle it on its own. So, I call for universal childcare. I think we've got to move to a system where the government is directly funding childcare centers. And there's plenty of proposals for the details of how to actually do it. There's a model in Denmark that I think works really well, where they kind of plan out actual childcare centers, on a block by block basis. But there's other ways we could do it, where it's just funding existing centers and making sure that we have a way to control the prices on this while ensuring everybody has access to it.
Right.
And obviously Zoran's running on it, and New York is just basically doing universal daycare, right? And that's I think a simpler model. But we have to go to universal childcare for the whole country. Is the kind of thing that's really difficult for a city or a state other than maybe New York City to fund, because it's such a massive program, and I think the federal government has to do it. The other place where affordability, when I talk about affordability in the city, it's housing, healthcare, childcare, and utilities, kind of in that order. And because our utility costs, people don't realize this, are going out of control in San Francisco. And now it's happening all over the country. Utility rates have skyrocketed over the past 5 years. There's a lot of reasons for this, but a simple solution for San Francisco is to move towards public power. So Sacramento, which is just a few miles north of us, they have municipal power and they pay 40% less in utility bills than we do. In San Francisco, it's surprising. People don't realize this, but San Francisco, we own our own dam. We have Hetch Hetchy Dam. And part of the deal for buying that dam was there was a federal law passed that required San Francisco to have federal power or public power. But through the process, PG&E somehow got mixed up in there. PG&E is our utility, our investor-owned utility, and they own all the distribution lines. And they're just slow walking, selling the stuff back to the city. So this is actually a place where, as a federal lawmaker, I can threaten to enforce that federal bill that passed, many years ago, and push PG&E to come to the table and negotiate and get San Francisco to own its own power, because we already generated ourselves, so we shouldn't be paying these crazy rates.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's absolutely right that focusing on these issues of affordability and making life cheaper for San Francisco residents is the way forward, because San Francisco is notorious in terms of providing the Republicans ammunition for saying, hey, look at these Democrat cities which are failing in terms of affordability, housing, and all these other areas. What do you have to say about that kind of attacks on Democratic cities? It is true that places like New York, San Francisco, LA are extremely unaffordable. Where does the blame go?
My view is the blame goes to the very top, because I think all these cities are kind of a canary in the coal mine for the rest of the country. Because if you look at it, affordability is getting worse in the cities. Like, we kind of got there first because cities became unaffordable first, but it's happening all over the country now. Like, if you look at the Sun Belt, which for so long was the place for cheap housing, and there's lots of housing construction going on, prices there are starting to go up, right? If you look at places in Texas like Austin or Dallas, prices there are going up. Right? We just haven't done these structural changes necessary to be able to tackle these problems. Like, we've lost that entire muscle of government where we actually say, okay, housing prices are going up. What do we do to start building more affordable housing? We don't have a way to execute that federally. We've kind of dissolved all our federal power to do it, and cities and states are not capable of handling it on their own. And so we just kind of like let it continue getting worse, slower and slower over time. But now it's at a breaking point, right? Now people are saying this is way too bad, and we're just going to vote for whoever's willing to blow up the whole system.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think it's just decades of negligence is really what it boils down to. And it's not accidental negligence; it's negligence of our politicians who got bought out by corporations that profit off of this negligence, right? It's crazy. Housing costs are great for a landlord and rentier class, and for companies like Blackstone and Blackrock that are just buying up houses and renting them and letting rents keep going up.
Hey there, if you liked that video, then subscribe to my channel, click on the link in my bio to follow me on Instagram, X, and more.